Hi, how's it going, Denise?
It's going
It's going good. This is,
well.
one of several videos in a row, so we're a little bit giggly. But what we wanted to tell you about for this one is an image from our Formidable 5 series. To remind you, Formidable 5 is 5 formidable artworks. So artworks that are nothing that you would want to mess with. By that I mean that they're really important, groundbreaking, major concept artworks. The reason that we chose these 5 artworks is because each of them has a concept that once you learn it, it's going to make it a lot easier to approach all different types of contemporary art. So this one that we're going to look at is by Carol Walker. Carol Walker's works there's something called installation where they create a whole environment. So it's not just one thing. As you'll see, it's like a whole room that's transformed. It's best to see these in person, but we'll do our best with the images that we have. So here, let me get me and Denise's heads out of the way here. Here is one image of this installation, and I just want to show you, here's kind of like how it's set up. So you can see it goes around the corner in a room.
Can I add something? You mentioned that it's best to see them in person, and they are to scale, so it's best that you physically interact with the silhouettes because that's part of the that's part of the effect, or that's part of the message of the work.
By to scale, you mean that they're human-sized?
The majority of them are, and she does incorporate perspective, so some appear further away, so they're smaller, like off in the distance, like the one in the upper right-hand corner there, but yeah.
So y'all have been looking at this image for a second. You've probably noticed something that makes you uncomfortable. Yes. Just in case you haven't, I'll point out a few. See this very odd nude figure with this penis that's grown into a palm tree, and there's a child on it. You find something disturbing now, Denise. Your turn.
Well, there are acts of sodomy happening, a couple of them, in the image here and also here, but here it's to people, and here there's a foreign object being used.
So the reason that I chose this artwork, or that Denise and I chose this artwork together, is because something we both run into in our classes is when we show contemporary artists whose work is disturbing, whose work is bothersome, sometimes students are thinking, why do we want to look at something that makes us uncomfortable? Why should I look at something that's going to make me feel bad or feel weird? And I think that's a really important question. So Denise, what do you think? Why should we look at things that are clearly uncomfortable and make us disturbed?
Well, most importantly, a lot of the images that she represents are actual events that happen, either historically, going back to the plantation era, or currently and all the time in between. And so if there are disturbing acts that happen, it does us no good to sweep them under the rug and pretend like they haven't happened. And so what artists try to do is when people want to ignore certain acts, they bring them to the forefront. And with Carol Walker, it's to scale, and it's high contrast, and it's in your face. And so she forces the viewer to address them.
So if we say, I only want to see nice images because then I'll be happy, what we're really doing is allowing ourselves to forget about real events that are important.
Yes, and the implications of those, how they affect our everyday lives, our everyday interactions with other people.
I think there's something to being uncomfortable and then sitting in the discomfort and just experiencing it that's actually good for personal growth. Is that a weird thing to say? Like forcing yourself to be uncomfortable?
Because you do grow as a person, because you're living in this false utopia that does you no good when you're faced with conflict.
Right.
And also understanding some of the you can talk about issues of identity and gender and cultural interactions and relationships by looking at the history behind those relationships. And that's what Carol Walker does.
And if we're uncomfortable with things like talking about race or gender or sexuality or violence or any of the things that are here that are sort of in your face, if we're uncomfortable with those things, then we don't address issues that really need addressing.
Right. Yeah. And those issues continue to happen.
So she doesn't want us to have a pretty sanitized version.
Right, because history is not pretty. Some parts of history are pretty, But there's a lot
Lots that
of
aren't.
history that has been forgotten or dismissed, and she wants us to be aware that these things happen. And she does this in a very graphic way, because sometimes we sanitize history, we diminish its significance, and so this over exaggeration of some of the images helps us to connect with, you say, the gravity of the image.
Yes, and so you were saying history isn't pretty, and obviously this is showing these not pretty moments, but then the silhouettes are beautiful. They're beautifully cut, so it's this interesting contrast.
And she does that throughout. There are images where she shows figures floating, dancing, playing, and then the next image, there's something very graphic and disturbing. And it's like, how do you resolve that conflict?
Right.
And if you really step back and think about it, that's the world that we live in. We could be going from one thing to another. Everything is, rosy, and all of a sudden we're confronted with something that just takes us out, takes us down. So it's a reflection of reality, but at the same time, we don't really step back and want to see it every day. It's like I don't want to see the reality. I experience it enough.
So this forces us.
It forces us to see.
Okay, well, we should finish up, but just to recap, Kara Walker is somebody who really wants the viewer to be uncomfortable, to be faced with disturbing imagery, and that's really a clear theme throughout contemporary art. There's lots of artists who are trying to force us to revel in discomfort or really kind of celebrate ugliness in different ways. And so once you kind of have an entrance into that concept from Kara Walker's work, I think it can help with a lot of contemporary art. Yeah. Any last thing to add?
No, nothing that comes to mind. I would say, just like with the other images, allow yourself to open up to that level of discomfort.
Right. Yeah. Look at it, be disturbed, and then later watch a puppy video. Just to watch, give yourself a little contrast, right?
YouTube puppy video.
Yeah. Yes. But first this, then puppy video. Okay. Good luck.